V2 of Enigma's Cold War Server dropped, and there were some major changes to the troop drop mechanic over V1. This video is going to teach you everything about the mechanic and how it works. We're going to go over the different troop types, their ranges, the mission timers for them, the requirements for troop drops and pickups, how to load troops into the helicopter, how to unload them in combat, which helicopters can carry certain troop types, how many seats do these helicopters have, and how much weight do Red and Blue Force troops weigh. Surprisingly, they are not the same weight. So to begin, let's take a look back at the history of drops on this server. Even within V1, there were different iterations of how troop drops were accomplished. When the server first started, you couldn't do any troop drops. This made helicopters like the Huey and the Hip mostly sidelined because of their weaker offensive weapons against ground targets. In a short amount of time, though, the CSAR and troop landings were added, and you'd have to simply cross enemy lines at first to place troops right across the border, and they would randomly destroy some units. With even more time, we get to the evolution into the mechanic which introduces the proximity requirement for landings. This is where the heliborne troop assaults really began to shine on this server. Transports like the Hip and the Huey had to put themselves into danger to fly into areas where smart defensive players would know to wait for them. So why do I bring the evolution of troop drops in V1 up when ECW has moved on to V2? Before we look at the mechanics of V2, I just wanted to give you, the viewer, an understanding of where it's been in the past, so you can see how far it's actually come when we look at the intricacies of the mechanic for V2. For the very first time on Enigma's Cold War server, in V2 we now have the ability to load 3 different troop classes into our helicopters: standard troops, special operations forces troops, and recon troops. Now all the helicopters can carry all 3 classes. In fact, only the Huey can do that. And while I normally talk about the Hip specifically, for this video I'll talk all about the different troop classes and all the helicopters so that the broader audience can find this informative and useful. If you're new to flying helicopters on the server, this should help you understand it no matter what type you fly. Let's talk about the functions of these different classes. The first one are standard troops, and they're used to do direct combat against enemy units. An enemy unit on the server is anything like a tank or a truck. It could be an artillery gun, a Humvee. It could even be a bunker or anti-aircraft guns and SAM sites. You'll use standard troops to attack these enemy formations along the front lines, but you could also use them to target air defenses at air bases or depots and factories deep behind enemy lines. And standard troops require being within 4 kilometers specifically inside an enemy sector to destroy anything. It's not possible to be within 4 kilometers of a target and try to release your troops inside friendly territory. You'll just get a message saying you can't drop there. When you do have a successful drop in enemy territory, however, it takes 3 minutes for the ground assault to conclude, and when that does, they will kill on a 1-to-1 basis. So that means a 4-man squad will kill 4 enemy units within range. And don't worry about this right now, we'll go over the mechanics for a drop later in the video, but let's just continue discussing the different troop classes. So standard troops come in squads of 4, like I mentioned. And this is important because helicopters in V2 now have seat limitations. The next type of soldiers you can carry are SOF, or Special Operations Squads. They are used for direct combat against enemy factories, depots, and infrastructure targets. Factories and depots are always present on the map, so if you look on the F10 map and you see something that looks like a factory or a house drawn on it, you can fly to that area and attack it using SOF squads. Infrastructure targets, however, are unique because they're only uncovered by recon from heliborne recon troops or high-altitude jet recon. When infrastructure targets are uncovered, they become visible on the map and in the in-game world. You'll then be able to use SOF troops to take them out. You must drop special operations troops within 2 kilometers of a target if you wish to destroy it. It takes 8 minutes for the spec op raids to conclude, and like standard troops, they will kill on a 1-to-1 basis. So 3 spec op soldiers that make up a squad will mean 3 factory, depot, or infrastructure targets will be destroyed in the attack. The final troop type that helicopters can carry are the recon troops. If your helicopter can load recon troops, you're able to bring them across enemy sectors and deploy them to reveal regular enemy units and infrastructure targets. Recon squads unveil all enemy units within 12.5 kilometers of a drop zone, and all infrastructure targets, factories, and depots within 25 kilometers of the drop zone. It takes 5 minutes for the recon mission to conclude, and the recon is only revealed on the map after you pick up the troops. Recon squads comprise of 2 soldiers. As I touched upon earlier, the reason that we are mentioning the sizes of the squads is because in V2 we're not only able to pick up different squads to use, but we can take different amounts of them. Helicopters have different number of seats in them, and you're free to carry as many squads as long as the seat capacity is there for them. For red, the Hip has 14 seats, and the Hind has 5 seats. For blue, the Huey has 10 seats, and the Gazelles have 3 seats. The Mistral version has 2 seats, but I don't believe that's on the server at the moment. Now that we know the seats available, what are the types of squads that are available to various helicopters? To start with red, the Hip can carry standard or SOF troops, the Hind can carry SOF troops or recon troops, and for blue, the Huey is the only helicopter that can carry all the squad types, so recon, standard, and SOF. The Gazelles available on the server can carry recon or SOF. We can see here the opportunity for quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how you want to operate on the battlefield. For instance, in the Hip, I tend to carry 3 standard troops, and that takes up 12 out of the 14 seats because 3 squads times 4 soldiers is 12. Because I have 2 seats remaining, I'm unable to load the other type of squad a Hip can carry, the 3-man SOF team. If I wanted to, though, I could load 2 squads of standard troops for 8 seats, and then load 2 squads of special forces, so that's 6 more seats. Then 8 plus 6 works out to be a perfect 14 out of 14 seats used. On the blue side, in a Huey, you can take 2 squads of standard troops for 8 seats total, and then use the remaining 2 seats on 1 recon squad. This allows you the ability to drop recon troops and then go attack the revealed units with your standard troops. Now, is there any benefit to leaving seats open? There certainly is. In V2, all the troops have weights to them, and they vary depending on your side. So for blue, each soldier weighs 100 kilograms, and for red, each soldier weighs 120 kilograms. The weights of these soldiers is applied to your helicopter when they board, and it's removed when they're out doing a drop off the helicopter. This means if you don't have a use for a seat on a particular sortie, there's no need to feel obligated to fill it. You'd be potentially hauling around useless weight in a helicopter, and when you factor in the weapons weight plus the fuel loading, that can be the difference between terrible hover performance and awful cruise speed, among many other things. Right, we now know what troops types we can load, into what helicopters we can load them, and how many. So finally, we'll talk about the troop mechanics from start to finish for doing a drop and a pickup. When you spawn in at a FARP or an aircraft carrier in a helicopter, you can load troops by using your radio menu. By default, it's the / key. And then you hit F10, and then the radio menu is open. You can hit F1 for troop options. From here, hit F1 once again for troop loading. Now you'll be able to see the different types of soldiers that your helicopter can carry. For the Hip, F1 will load a standard squad, and F2 will load a special operations squad. Select one squad you want to load, and you'll be shown a message telling you what types are now loaded into the helicopter and the total weight that was added. If you'd like to load more squads in, just repeat the steps. You'll have to do this each time per additional squad loaded. Once again, you'll have to have the seats available to fit a full squad type into your helicopter. So if you have 2 seats left, you can't fill it with half a standard 4-man squad. Now, what do you do if you load a squad type on accident that you didn't want to load? Well, simply go back to the troop radio menu and select troop drop instead of troop load, and you'll see a selection to pick and choose what squad type to disembark. If you have multiples of the same squad type, let's say you have 3 standard troops on board, you'll have options written off to the side that say drop 3, drop 2, or drop 1. Once you have these squads loaded how you like, you're all set for embarking on your way to the front line. Remember, all troop landings have to be done in enemy territory. There's 2 ways you can do troop landings. One way is very simple, but I find it very dangerous. You basically just land within range of your target, whether it's 4 kilometers for standard soldiers or the 2 kilometers for special operations forces. And when you land, you go through the menus to order them out of the helicopter. You can probably imagine in a helicopter, depending on how you land, you might need your hands on the controls and you don't want to be clicking around. And perhaps it's really hectic because you're under fire. So if you don't want to fumble around with the commands, Thankfully, there's another method to order the troops out. Once you're in the air, whether you've just lifted off from the FARP or you're over friendly or enemy territory, you can order the troop drops from the radio menu, and they'll automatically deploy the next time that you touch the ground. Think of this as arming a troop drop. This means you can set it when you're in a stable state, maybe you're trimmed for cruise and you're on your way to the front. All you need to do is land the helicopter and the squads you've selected to drop will deploy on their own. This makes it possible to minimize time on the ground since you're not having to click through the squads to get out. They just do it automatically on their own at that point. What do you do if you pick up the wrong squad type to deploy or you don't want them to auto-deploy anymore? Well, you can go back into the drop menu and you'll get an option to cancel the troop drop. You can set something else to drop or just leave the troop drops unarmed for auto-deployment. Another thing about troop drops is you can command multiples of the same squad type to drop at once, but you cannot drop different types at once. To do this, you'll have to wait until one squad type deploys and then order the second type out. You don't have to take off and land again, which is great. You can stay on the ground and they'll just get out when ordered. If you were to drop multiple squad types in close succession, consider which one has the longest mission time and let them out first. I do this quite a bit with the SOF raids. I'll take a squad or two of standard troops with me, but I'll let the Spec Ops squads out first because it takes 8 minutes for them to complete their tasking. Letting the standard squads out second still means they'll complete their mission first because the length is only 4 minutes in duration, and it allows the longer 8-minute timer to have been going for a little bit already. Typically, I bring and use standard squads to destroy any air defense of depots or factories that I'm raiding with Spec Ops, so that later on I can fly out safely, or if I need to do follow-on attacks, I'm unharassed by the air defense. This also helps out the jet strike aircraft. If you take out air defense at a factory, it will be down for 2 hours. So considering the server runs 4 hours, it's a pretty substantial opening there for air attacks. Alright, now let's say you got your troops down on the ground in enemy territory. Do you have to do anything else? No. You can sit there if you want. Your troops may run off a little ways, or they might stay put. And it's up to you if you want to fly around and do some recon while you wait, or perhaps it's just too dangerous because of SAMs or the enemy air threat is too great. The key thing you really should do to help you out is to have a stopwatch running the moment your troops deploy. Start the timer. It doesn't matter if the last guy departs the helicopters 10-15 seconds later. The time for the troop missions begins when the first person hits the ground. By keeping track of that time, you'll know when to expect to get the exfil message. If you decide to fly around in orbit somewhere, it's great because you can anticipate when to fly back towards the target area for pickup, and that maximizes your efficiency. I like to scout around if the air cover isn't bad. I'll fly off 1.5 minutes towards the next area that I feel I should probably be doing my troop drops, and I'll fly back after that 1.5 minutes has expired so that I arrive when my standard troops have destroyed a target. So the next phase of the mechanic is the pickup. In V2, you get a tiny message in the top right when a mission's completed telling you that the troops are waiting for exfil. If you open up the chat, you'll see what your troops destroyed. You'll get a bunch of yellow messages to cue you in to look at that. And generally, the troops are going to stay in the same area, not stray too far off. So as long as you fly towards the area that you dropped them off, you should be in the vicinity of where you need to be to pick them up. Now, when the troops are ready for pickup, someone will be firing a flare. You need to keep in mind that anybody can see that flare going off. So if there's a lot of enemy air activity, you might want to be quick in trying to pick them up, or you might want to wait until some of the air activity has died down. If you can't find the flares firing, you can go and look on the F10 map, and the F10 map is going to have a circle marker that shows you where the troops are. You can click on that circle marker, and I think it specifically tells you what type of troops are waiting and that they're waiting for pickup. Once you've found your troops waiting for the exfil, you can pick them up in 2 ways. You can land within 75 meters of the person firing the flare, or you can hover within 75 meters of the person firing the flare. Basically, everyone that you dropped off is going to be in a ring or in a group around a single soldier that's firing a flare at a set interval. When this interval is happening, it's checking to see if you are under 1 meter a second in movement and if you're within that 75 meter bubble. if that happens, then the troops will automatically load into the helicopter. You don't have to do any sort of radio commands to order them back into the helicopter. And you'll know it's successful because you'll get a pop-up message that's going to tell you what was loaded into the aircraft and how much weight was loaded and how many seats are available versus how many are used. In very rare circumstances, the troops might wander into the woods or they might wander into an urban area and require pickup, but they're surrounded by buildings. In this case, obviously, you're not likely going to be able to land next to them for pickup. You'll just have to hover. There are oil rigs that you can attack that are out in the ocean, and if you were to do that, the troops would be in the water after a successful raid, and obviously you're going to have to hover there as well to pick them up. After you've got your troops on board, either from a landing or from a hover, from here it's once again up to you. Your troops are redeployable, so you can take them onto different objectives over and over and over again. All you have to do is remember, if you want to use the radio command to arm them, that you do that once you're in flight again. If you don't want to continue on, you can go and return them back at an airbase or a FARP and drop them off, and maybe pick up different squad types for different sets of missions. And I hope that this cleared up the troop drop mechanic. If you have any questions, post them below and I'll try to sort them out. I do have a question for all of you guys, however. What are the troop squad combinations that you personally like to take out with you when you go into battle? I look forward to hearing some of the creative combos that some of you guys might come up with and some of the use cases for them. So till next time, bye.